Thank you everybody for coming along tonight. This is an evening, a chance to hear from the artists who were commissioned to create work for the Artful Ways project this year. I'll let them all introduce themselves very briefly, and then we're going to share a slideshow so you can see some of their work, and then we'll go into a conversation. So please get those questions flowing, and anything you're curious about, do ask them. So those of you, I'm sure everybody who's here knows what the Artful Ways project is, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But it was set up by Rob and me with a lot of wonderful support partners this summer to invite people to take part by walking and mapping their walks and coming up with creative responses to walks, and the idea of creativity, connection and place in Cumbria. So huge thanks to Cumbria Arts and Culture Network, not just for the support tonight, Amy, but for support throughout the whole project. And the project really grew out of the network and the way people were connecting online to make it happen in real life for those people who could get outside. So thank you very much to Cumbria Arts and Culture Network. The exhibition, which we're talking about tonight, is currently on show at Tully House. So thanks Tully House for that. It's an Arts Council funded project, so huge thanks to them, and we've had support from Cumbria Museums Consortium as well, and Great Place Lakes and Dales. After Tully House, the exhibition will be going to the Studio Moorland and Florence Arts Centre in 2022, so thanks to them. And as I'm sure you know, there are people around the county who've just been superb for the last few months to help this project become what it was, so thank you everybody. So I'll just ask the artists to introduce themselves in a couple of sentences, and I will go in alphabetical order, and then we'll move into the PowerPoint. So first up, Alex. Come off mute, actually.
There's always one, and it's always me. Thanks for that, Harriet. I'm now off mute. Yes, I'm Alex Jakob Whitworth, and I was working on the Artful Cumbria commission, which included the doorway and the cabinet. I think that's enough.
Thank you very much. Anne.
Hello, good evening. I'm Anne. I'm a geographer, artist, printmaker and director at Florence Arts Centre. And my project is Bibliotrex, a sculptural installation including all sorts of different things.
Thank you. After A comes Lorna. Lorna's dialing
Hello.
in from a car park somewhere in Inverness, I think.
Sorry, I look like I'm in like a haunted house thing, don't I? Yeah, I'm Lorna. I'm a basket maker and weaver, and I did a 3-day walk making baskets each day.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up, Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Capovila, and I'm based in Barrington.
You've muted yourself, Rachel. Can you start again?
Oh, I'm rubbish. So I'm Rachel, and I'm from and based in Barrow, and I'm a socially engaged and process-led artist who often may use film, and in this instance I did.
Thank you. And Rosie.
Hi, I'm Rosie, and I'm mixed media artist, currently working a lot with textiles, and I'm quite interested in theoretical points, I guess. Thank you.
And I'm Harriet Fraser, and I'm one half of the Frasers. Rob Fraser is just in the background, going to alert us to any technical issues or other Q&As. And together we practice Somewhere Nowhere, and we kind of dreamt up Artful Ways and have been doing our best to steer it. So Rob says hello to everybody, and even though he's not on the screen. So I'm going to share my screen now, and each artist is going to share 4 images and talk about them to give us an overview of what they've done. So here goes. This should work. How are we doing? Have a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Excellent. So if you could get ready, Alex, I'm going to share your slides now.
Okay, so this piece I called Meeting Alchemy, because I felt very much the project was about people and ideas and coming together in generally. And the idea of the alchemy was this kind of magic that we were all making by doing that. This is the doorway, it's in two parts, this piece. And the first part was a doorway, which I kind of invited people to step through, because I felt it was very much a metaphor for where we've been, where we're going, what we were doing, as well as doorways are a huge metaphor, I think, culturally as well. Our language is just peppered with different references to doors and thresholds. And I've written at length about this on the website, so you can read a little bit more about it. But in this instance, I'm asking you to step through this doorway into a possibly imagined space where you can see the cabinet at the end. And this is where the muse works. Next slide, please, Harriet. So I've just got a couple of shots from the cabinet, and on top of the cabinet is what I call the balance of all things. And I found this in a shop, and it was just perfect for what I wanted to do. And all the little weights I've painted in a very light sky blue colour, which I thought was the colour of light, so that even though they're weights, I wanted them to be light to give the whole thing a feeling of space and lift as well, because we've had this really difficult time. Each weight has got a word on it, and it's as though the muse is weighing up things that we need to be creative, but she's also weighing up maybe how we behave as well, because I thought that was a really important part of the project, because we were looking at how we might artfully care for the environment very much more. So there's a lot of words here, there's a lot of text in the project, because most people's submissions were written, so I felt that really needed to be reflected in the piece that I made. So there's a lot of words and text and ideas in the whole piece. Thank you, Harriet. So these are the ingredients for creativity, and again, these ingredients were things that people had submitted, things that people had said, and they were also, there's references to a poem, some poems that I wrote, which was part of the whole creative process of doing the project. So
sorry, I'm moving on to the next slide because we need to move on.
Okay,
Alex.
okay,
Sorry,
I'll be very quick.
A quick fire process. Thank you.
So very quickly on here then, just lots of different items that came about through the things that people submitted, and you can ask me questions about them later. Will that do?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So next up we have Wagon Knot.
Thanks, Harriet. Just for the benefit of anyone who's not able to see the screen, I'm a white female sitting in an attic bedroom with my hair tied back, and I'm wearing a grey and pink jumper and a black scarf. And my proposal was born out of a strong feeling that we cannot map our own region in isolation, that we have to reach out across our borders and connect with neighbouring places and people and ideas and cultures. I think I might have felt the project told a slightly incomplete story without some decisive reach outside of Cumbria. So Bibliotrex, my project, is about provoking journeys to the periphery in every sense. Next slide, please, Harriet. So I embarked on 5 representative walks across or around the borders in our 5 neighbouring counties. I walked on the Solway coast with Dumfries and Galloway based artist Katie Anderson, and we discussed building our practice as a contemporary rural practice and our borderlands in the context of an urban-centric art world. I then walked in the Tynedale Valley with my classmate from Carlisle College, Sarah Elliott. And although Sarah and I have had very different life experiences, college will always be our shared creative journey, which is why that was important. Next slide, please, Harriet. I then walked across Morecambe Bay on a stunning hot day with Joanne Hale and Michael Wilson and about 800 other people. I left a lot to chance on this walk, and it turned out to be a walk for female empowerment and a moment that was really worth documenting. You can watch my short film, Her Line in the Sand, which is on the Artful Ways website, to find out a little bit more about why that was so important. My final 2 walks were in quite wild locations around the borders of County Durham and North Yorkshire. A bit of reflective time for me really on the project, and as I did that, a rhythm emerged and I found a kind of physical and creative momentum. I also discovered a strong sense of wanting to take the audience with me and bring you into the artwork itself. Next slide please, Harriet. Thank you. So here are some images of the work. I called on the inspirational power in the end of open books as a structure because they can whisk us off on really exciting journeys beyond all kinds of borders. And I found the themes from my different walks, themes of water, shelter, energy, navigation, ruralness, rurality, they come and go throughout the whole work. There are these small playful figures clambering around the work as well. They invite you to join them on their little haphazard journeys as they explore it. And you'll come across poetry too. Some of it's clear and some of it's really ambiguous. And that's because connecting can be a really frustrating, uncertain process, a gradual process sometimes. Sometimes we don't understand everything straight away when we're trying to connect with other people and places. It's never easy to negotiate borders, and I wanted that to be clear. So Bibliotrex is a work in progress, really. It's my studio practice laid bare in some ways. There are 6 books on the wall, not 5. And the extra book, the 6th one, represents our next journeys and connections not yet made. So it's really the opening of the next chapter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. I like the idea of moving on to the next chapter. So now next up, Lorna, are you still with us?
I think so. Hello.
Hey, great.
Yay.
Lovely. Right, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Harriet. Yes, so my artful way was to do a 3-day walk from home in a circuit, so just to walk out and back, and to walk the sort of the boundaries of the area I'd been confined to during lockdown, which was the valley I live in the Rustling Valley, and also a kind of origin story of the baskets I make from the woodlands and the sort of industrial heritage in the woodlands and all the way to Morecambe Bay, where they were used as well on the sands. And so this picture is a hazel stump that I found straight away. So the idea was just to walk and stop and weave baskets and just see what happened, really, leave some space for creativity. So next one, please, Harriet. So this is me sitting by Lake Windermere, weaving a basket. So I'm always inspired by how useful a natural environment is, and has been as well. And a lot of my work is linked to sort of archaeological features as well in the landscape that really fascinate me, and how the woodland has been used in the past as well. And I think this is sorry, it's supposed to be a quick fire, isn't it? This is just it's inspiring to see how the natural environment has been used and how quickly it recovers from like quite heavy industrial use. And yeah, that's just quite like a humble process, really, that we're not totally effing it up. Next one, please, Harriet.
Okay, so if you could be quick with the last 2, please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is Spider's Web. So the whole walk was really just about weaving all sorts of ways, weaving a path, weaving life together, other things that weave, and weaving baskets as well. Next one. Yeah, and this is a lump of iron slag that I found on the walk as well, just to really emphasize the sort of the history of the place, and that nature seems to be sort of endlessly resourceful, and we can use that in many different ways. Looking at the history of it can inspires me to be creative in different ways. I think that's all.
Thank you,
Is that quick
Lorna.
enough?
Oh, I've gone too fast. Thank you very much. Rachel.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so my resulting artwork was a synchronized short film side by side of a journey, like everyone else. But in this instance, it was to a little island, which is just off the coast of Barrow. Barrow's made up of quite a few islands, actually. And this is one of my favourite places in the area, because when I was a child, I was a Famous Five fan, and Famous Five and mysterious smugglers and castles and stuff. But it's also a favourite landmark for a lot of people in Barrow, and there's quite a few characters that do walks over to the island, and there's the ferryman. And because it was my favourite place, and I was thinking about nostalgia and everybody coming back together after COVID, I thought this might be a good way of coming together with lots of different people, and the actual journey in itself is the artwork, the conversations, the people involved. Next slide, please, Harriet. And this gentleman here, he's John Murphy, who's like a local character, historian and naturalist. And he's quite well known in the area, and he knows so much about the local wildlife and fauna, and people just love him. And he's got his own little act that he does, patter and jokes, and it's just really fun, and everyone can join in. And he leads the walk over from Southend of Walney over to Peel Island, which is where the final destination is. And while you're able to walk across that way, there's also a deep water channel that goes on the other side of the island, between Roe Island and Peel, and to get at high tide or from that end of the town, you have to go across on ferry. So I decided to do both the walk and the ferry trips, because the ferryman also does seal trips. And now everybody was coming out, I just thought, right, everyone's gonna be excited about coming together. And it wasn't anything particularly deep that I was thinking about. It was more of a celebration of what was happening. Next slide, please, Harriet. And, you know, watching people, engaging with people in conversations, and just encouraging people to tell me a little bit about their experiences. But ultimately, of course, I can't make a film about all the conversations and the things that I saw. I've got hours and hours of footage. So the resulting film that you see is just a very short interpretation of what happened on the various days that I did these different journeys. Next slide, Harriet, please. And as part of the walks and the trips on the ferry, I'd made a zine, if you like, and it opened out into this cabinet of curiosities. And I encouraged people to read the zine, because within the zine, I was encouraging people to go and see things on the island, cultural things, if you like. So the castle, go into the shipping pub, which has also got a permanent exhibition there called Seldom Seen from Art Jean. And there's various other landmarks on the island where I was encouraging people to go, but also asking them to join in by collecting things on their journey, opening up the zine and putting it into the cabinet, taking a photograph, and then hopefully engage on social media with it.
Thanks, Rachel. We'll ask a bit more about that later on. Okay, thank you. Rosie, are you with us?
Hello, yes, I am.
Hi, Rosie, here we go.
Okay, it's loading slowly. Oh, goodness, what's happening there? Oh,
sorry.
there.
Let's try again. There we go.
Okay, so the idea for my story started, I basically stumbled across a piece of Carlisle's history that very few people know about. Dixon's chimney that you can see in the picture is pretty much halfway between my studio and my house. I go past it every day. You know, it's always been in my life in Carlisle, and more recently it became important to people, or in a tragic way, because of the death of Phil Longcake, and it's like a tragedy that the whole city felt. But anyway, I was looking into the industrial archaeology of Carlisle, and I came across a really interesting article by somebody that explained that Dixon's Mill used to make slave cloth, which is a colloquial term for cheap cloth that was made and then sent back over to the American states for slaves to wear, enslaved people to wear on the plantations. And it was quite a shocking piece of information for me. I'd never really considered Carlisle had a role to play in this history. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry. Can you see that?
Yes. So the kind of cloth that was made in Carlisle was called a gingham, and it's very different to the gingham that we have in the 20th century. So it was basically a woven cloth that had been dyed with vegetable dyes, and the cotton that it was made from actually came from the plantations as well. So Carlisle at the time was the biggest, well, Dixon's Mill was the biggest cotton producer in the country at the time. And so much information I'm trying to say. But basically, Dixon's Mill went out of business at the end of the American Civil War because there wasn't a market anymore for this cloth that they were producing, and they brought in brand new machinery and all sorts of state-of-the-art stuff, but they were stuck on this business model that relied on this terrible part of our history. And when that fell away, and it's interesting to know that actually slavery was outlawed in the UK like 60 years previously, but up and down the country we were all still benefiting from the trade of goods that had been sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. So the trade of goods that had been enabled to be so cheap because of the use of enslaved people. Next slide, please.
Thanks. I have to move you on reasonably quickly. Thank you.
So, the walk that I did was going from Dixon's Mill, and I followed the path of the old Carlisle Canal to Port Carlisle. The canal was running at the time when the factory was built, and then it was turned into a railway, and then I think it was closed in the 1930s. And in this picture you can see examples of clothes that would have been worn by enslaved people on the plantations, made from the cloth made at the mill. Next slide, please. So this is the piece that I made, and it's called Tangled Threads, which is a title that really relates to the tangled history as much as anything, and just the complexity of the issue, and how do we come to terms with it in the 21st century, considering that it's not particularly distant history. You know, it's almost within living history of the people in the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm sorry it was such a quick fire, but we need to find a way of sharing all the images from all of the artists. So yeah, thank you for that. It just goes to show how broad the range of stories and interpretations can be from Cumbria, and different interpretations, different histories, and what might be found out or what might be explored. So I think, you know, it's difficult to know kind of what questions to ask from my point of view. So I do urge you all to put a question in if you've got one into the chat. I just thought I'd start by asking Rachel, of all of the art projects or the commissions, yours kind of involved the most community members and the most of kind of events of getting lots of different people involved. And I wondered if your own sense of connection in Barrow or to Peel has changed as a result of you doing this artwork.
I think it's enhanced my connection, and a lot of my work is about connection to place and to community, and it's a theme that runs through much of my work. But I think what I hadn't realised, and like all of us until COVID, just how much you do connect with your community on an everyday basis. And Barrow, although not a small town at all, is like a village in the sense that everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, and so that everyday interactions that you might have with people are no longer there. Even though I was a lucky one to be out and about during COVID because I had ponies and dogs and isolating parents and stuff to look after, but I just knew that these walks and the new trips back with the ferryman and the seal trips would be very exciting for the whole community and, you know, tourists alike that we're visiting. And it was really lovely to meet lots of new people and get their point of view of what they thought Barrow was in regards to the industrialization of, you know, a town, if you like, compared to their actual experience, and also meeting people whom I haven't seen for a while. And so it reaffirmed how much it meant to me and how much the doing was important to me and my well-being. And it'll just feed into more work as I do down the line, really. I'm not sure if I answered the question. But...
Yeah, no, that's great. And one more question for you. You've, for those of you who haven't seen Rachel's film, she's presented 2 films side by side. So I just wondered if you could briefly explain your thinking behind that, why you've chosen to show it like that.
Well, firstly, when I read the guidelines for the proposals, and it was saying basically if you were to show a film, it had to be a certain length. And I was like, crikey, oh, how am I going to get all that in? So initially in my proposal, it was, right, if I do 2 films side by side, I can get a lot more in. And initially I was thinking one would be all the wildlife and fauna and landscape that you'd see on the journeys. And then in the other film, which would be next to it, it'd be the connections and interactions with the people and the actual doing, if you like, with the community. And it didn't end up like that in the end, which is with all things. And I am very much, I don't have fixed views particularly as well. So it just ended up being 2 short films, 3 minutes each, side by side. And one was very much the journey going by ferry to the island and to the seals. And the other one was very much the journey from on foot from Southend of Walney through to the island. And the overall audio was snippets of conversation of people telling me things, wildlife sounds and birds and seals and the sea and the wind. And so although it's not a cohesive record of the journeys, it's just a short interpretive flavour, if you like. I could have gone on forever actually with it.
No, and it works really well because your eyes drawn to different places. So yeah, thank you. And what you say about how you have a plan at the beginning and then you go through a process and it may become something else towards the end. I was thinking, Rosie, of all the pieces, perhaps you've chosen the most kind of challenging subject, or the history that emerged in the course of your work was perhaps more challenging than other people's. And that's an interesting process to go through as you uncover things and you have conversations along the way. And I wondered if you wanted to say something about that process and how ultimately it feels to have the artwork in an exhibition space.
Well, it was it was a very difficult process in some ways because it constantly just threw up my ignorance of so much. You know, I always thought myself as somebody that was quite sort of well connected with current issues, and doing this piece, it became clear to me that I have so much to learn about how to represent things, about how a different piece can impact different people in different ways. And, you know, all the nuances around such a difficult topic, such as slavery, it's been quite a journey the last few months, getting to this point and making a piece, I think, and just sort of, you know, I'm not even sure I've done the topic justice. I think my finding of the story and presenting it is more of a starting point, I think, you know, rather than encapsulating all of it just in one go and that's it, there, it's done. It's like, I think this is an ongoing conversation that Carlisle needs to.
I think that's what I was going to ask, was what kind of conversations or curious avenues do you hope might come from this starting point?
Well, I think there can be an attitude of some people to, oh, that's the past. We don't want to dig that up. We don't want to talk about that. What's the point of going backwards? We're going forwards. But actually, it's history like that that has a massive impact on our current attitudes and the current issues that we're dealing with, and not really having unpacked it. I think there's so much in recent British history that we've just quickly sped over. Oh, well, that was then and this is now, and trying to pretend it didn't happen, but it did happen. And I think it's very healthy for us as a country and a community, communities up and down the country, to actually stop getting defensive and just start being open to talking about the effects that maybe our past has had on others and on ourselves as well. You know, I think there's a lot to be covered in that, I think. But again, it's so complex. I think it was easy for me to just focus on something like, you know, this one topic, this one cloth, making clothes, and but even within that, by pulling it in, I can still, you know, I actually find it quite hard to talk about the piece because I think that there's so much still spinning out from it. And I think, you know, maybe it's something that I need to look at as further as a white British female, and just the entire history of it, and how I've told it as well. I think it's quite important to think about.
Thank you. Thanks, Rosie. There's you know, an entire topic and weeks of conversation to follow on from that. And Al's asked a question in the chat about the form of your piece, which to her seems to reference a ship's rigging, and wonders if that was part of your thinking. So if you could just see if you have some thoughts on that. And then we'll talk.
Yeah.
No.
What now?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, actually, the ship's rigging thing, it was actually accidental. But when we were installing the piece at Tully House, and I was talking to Lindsay Atkins, and we talked about it, and I think it became more clear as the piece went up that it does relate to the ships that would have been part of the slave trade. But you were asking about how did I come up with the final piece? Basically, the scale of the pieces is entirely to do with the fact that I wanted to make all the things. I wanted to make all the outfits and show a whole variety of people that might have been affected, well, who were affected by this history. And the only way for me to feasibly do that in the short space of time I had was to make small outfits. And, you know, and I think there's been problematic aspects of that maybe for some people, because it sort of almost makes out that they're toys, that they're, you know, like I'm diminishing the story of these people by making them miniatures. But it was actually just intended to try and create an abundance of people, you know, that it's like it's a story of many voices, not just one. And the reason I hung it up so high was to reflect Dixon's chimney, the height of the chimney that hangs over, you know, it looms over the city. I can see it from my backyard even. And yeah.
Thank you. And I think your work has given a new relevance to Dixon's chimney and a point of consideration and thought for people who see it every day and perhaps didn't know that aspect of its history. So thank you. Just looking at my screen, Alex, I did cut you short on your presentation. I'm sorry about that. There's so much in your piece, and just for people's reference, on the Artful Ways website, Alex has spoken a lot about the individual parts of her piece, and there's a legend of the different things that are involved, and you've put in your cabinet and your muse's cabinet. So it's hard to kind of know what particularly to pick up on about that, but your task was to consider all the contributions. We had nearly 90 people contributing to the map and their thoughts and answering the project questions. And you went through all of these in really great detail, and you also did your own walks. And I wondered if you were looking for themes. You're the only person who has this in-depth knowledge of the entire project. Did you find that themes emerged, or did you have to try and represent a really wide variety?
A bit of both, really. A bit of both. Some common themes, I think, were the importance of us all being able to get together. It was not just important because we've perhaps been locked up for a long time, but it's part of what makes us human beings. And connected to that, of course, is the, in fact, importance is too small a word. This is vital. Not that we just get together, but that we make things. We are creative beings. You know, as I once said to somebody, one of the first things human beings did, so the arrival of the modern mind was us maybe making marks on a cave wall, or making sounds together, you know, singing. I mean, there's a theory that we did that before we had language, and likewise a theory that once we started making marks on something else, that's the arrival of the modern mind. So it's a being creative, is what we call it now, is a completely normal and natural part of being a human being. It's part of our humanity, and that seemed to be something that really came across in everybody's submissions. And the other thing I think was lovely was people questioning what culture was. Culture could be the way that somebody once had named a particular shape of a particular hill, or it could be an opera. Culture can be such a wide variety of things. Kind of the spectrum that I was given was enormous, and so trying to distill this to and make something visual was a huge and very enjoyable challenge. And then there were some little specifics that I thought were so important they had to be in there on their own. And there's almost too many to say, and you'd probably have to go and spend a long time with the piece to find them all. There were words that people said, phrases that people said, and there were stories that people told, and I was trying to reference a lot of those. And as well, I don't like the phrase high culture and low culture, but things that I thought were specifically Cumbrian that needed to be in there, and things that I needed to sort of play with as well. Like there's for example, there's a little sign you'll see everywhere in Cumbria saying "Take care, red squigs on road." So I put "Take care, poets on road." I thought that would be just a nice little reference to that as well. But there were some individual things that really struck a chord as well, like somebody did a walk where they followed the path of bees, which I thought summed up an awful lot to do with how we need to be caring for our environment, how we're damaging the world, how we use the word dance to describe what bees do, to talk to each other. I thought the idea of following the path of them was brilliant, but then we also have concerns that we're worried that there seem to be less bees than there should be. So it's kind of very much tied up with the damage that we're all doing by the way that we be and what we do and what we want and what we aspire to. It's also extremely damaging to the planet. I felt that was particularly tied up with that. So, and there's all this lovely synchronicities and during the process, I'd also written, before I read that, I'd written a poem which I called Bees and the Importance of Dancing. So I'd got my little watercolor of a bee, and I was very lucky to get some real ballet point shoes from a ballerina who has her own Wikipedia page, and they could be part of the piece as well. And I love the fact that they were used shoes. I thought that was right.
It's brilliant. There's so many crossovers. And so somebody's asked about the text that you've used. So I think, you know, the recommendation is please go and see Alex's piece if you're not able to go on her webpage. And also all of the entries on the map, if you click on the icons there, you'll find the writing and the photographs that Alex was drawing on. I did get you know, the idea of the muse and the door as a portal are both about transformation and choice. And there seems to me to be a strong sense in your piece about being at a threshold moment, which yes, we are all times. Looking back, it's happened a lot in the past. We're certainly now in a time of big change, and I think your piece is really powerful in inviting a pause to think about that. And it just shows, because you've responded to what everybody else has put into the project, it shows that it's a shared voice. So
Yeah.
thank you. Now then, Lorna, are you still there? Because I can't see you. I just want to check.
Hello.
Hi, Lorna. Hi.
Hi.
So Alex was talking about the natural world and the path of bees and general concern for how we look after it. Your work is always embedded in the woods and working with trees and the weather. And you talked about weaving together yourself and place and the oak in your baskets. So I wonder if you could say something about the way the creative process for you interweaves that, your human self and place and how we all relate.
Oh my God, that's
I don't want to put you on the spot, but
that's like, can you just like sum up all of your soul in words, please? Yeah, it's something I was really thinking about on the walk and since, and in preparing for this. Like, why does it all mean so much to me, or how does it actually? Why am I so interested in the history, or what? Like, how does that make me creative? I don't really know. Other than, I think it's just where I can find myself again. And I mean, it was a really personal journey. It wasn't really aiming to deal with anything larger like the other artworks did. It was a really personal journey, personal walk. And yeah, I don't know. I just love trees. I just love being out in the trees and being able. I don't know. I think it all just makes sense to me to be able to use the natural resources around us. I've tried to make useful baskets that people will use in daily, in their daily lives. And I think mostly that's so that I can justify it to myself. I don't know why. But yeah, I'm always looking at the history and how people have lived, and just I think in order to sort of make a sensible future as humans, how can we live more responsibly on this landscape? And there's a lot of answers in the past for that. Yeah, I don't know. It's a really hard.
Thank you. No, I know it's hard to sum up, and you do write about it really well. Please do look at the blogs that Lorna's contributed to the website. There was a selection panels that looked through all of the commissions, and between us we did try to get a breadth and that personal element and that stitching back of self while weaving baskets and walking was a really strong point for Lorna. And all these commissions share similar things because they're part of the same project, but they're all very different, and that's part of the beauty. Anne, we haven't spoken to you. Your idea of approaching a project about Cumbria by saying, yes, but I want to go outside and subvert the idea of borders and boundaries. And I know that's part of your work. So I wondered if you want to say any more about that, and maybe how that also becomes part of the artwork that you share as well.
Yeah, I think if you put me in a theatre audience, maybe 50% of my attention will be on what's happening on the stage, and the other 50% will be looking around me saying, who's outside the stage? Why are they here? What are they doing? What's their motivation? Who are they? I'm always interested in what's going on the periphery, I think, and always have been. I think, gosh, it's another kind of summing up your soul in 2 minutes, isn't it? I think that ties in with a question that Al Critchlow asked in the chat quite nicely, which was about whether I have a renewed sense of place in the context of Cumbria after this. And I think it was really interesting in two ways. In one respect, I went to some new places that I'd never been, which gave me a chance to reflect from a new perspective in a new landscape. And I also went to old places that I knew with people I hadn't been there with them before. So that gave me a chance to reflect differently on that place than I might have done in the past. There was also the privilege of traveling and walking and taking journeys after successive lockdowns. So it felt almost as if it was a time to redefine a sense of place in a way, because we'd all been cooped up in various ways for so long. So it gave me a lot of different perspectives. And I mean, the project of doing 5 walks for this was absolutely ridiculous. It was way too much to take on for, you know, a modest sized commission, but it's given me the chance to reflect on reaching out in a more general sense for my own practice, and also for my work at Florence Arts Centre too. So in terms of my own practice, I'm quite an early career artist for anybody that doesn't know me. And my previous career was all about building partnerships and relationships. And this has really helped me work out how I can start to do that as an artist rather than, you know, in a previous corporate job. And for Florence Arts Centre, which is one of the destinations that this exhibition will be going to next, it's helped me to kind of, in all the roles I'm undertaking there, to look for the unexpected and to look for the challenges. And, you know, again, look to the outside of whatever we're doing, of our core business, and say, okay, how can we push further? How can we be more ambitious for the contemporary arts in a rural place like Cumbria?
That's
probably enough waffle
that's a
for
good
now,
question.
but lots and lots of important reflection.
Thank you. That's a good question, and it kind of taps into the fact that the Artful Ways project was born out of a community of artists and networking and trying to find the unexpected and be ambitious. And using that word, there's a question here in the chat from Derek, who rather bizarrely might be the only male on the entire call, given that we're on 2 screens. That's quite surprising. How commonly shared was the revelation of the unknown in the apparently familiar? And this is a question to any of you that would like to answer it. Asking about the revelation of the unknown in the apparently familiar. So along your way, kind of, what was the surprise? What came out to you that you'd least expected, Rosie?
Well, for me, it came out of lockdown, of just what I'm somebody that I like going traveling, I like going abroad, I like going to other cities. And what lockdown did was sort of force me to pay more attention to what was under my nose. And, you know, Dixon's Chimney's there, it's familiar, I know it. And then, you know, finding out these alternative histories was part of a process of just, I find industrial archaeology fascinating. We just walk past these relics, like Lorna was saying on her walk. You walk past these things all the time and don't make the connection that actually that was put there by people. There was a purpose to it. You know, there was a whole infrastructure that goes on, and we are sort of living our lives based on sitting on the shoulders of that in some ways as it sort of disintegrates underneath us. So yeah, I think I really love that aspect of taking the familiar and making it unfamiliar. I think that's a central part of my practice, of that sort of taking, you know, things that we feel reassured by and making them less reassuring, you know, to sort of shake us out of our complacency about things.
Thank you. And I remember Lorna, maybe Lorna's gone actually, also said that it was the first time, you know, it made her look at the woods differently, even though she's there all the time. Does anybody else want to answer that question? Alex?
Turn my mic on. I think it was from what I read, it was very common that people were finding the unexpected in something very, very familiar. That was a common thread running through all the submissions, certainly, because people are having to stay at home and they get to know their local area so much better than they would normally, you know, all the places you walk past every single day and don't notice really what's there and don't appreciate. And we could be talking about something really small, like some particular plant growing in a particular place, or the sound of a bird at a certain time of day, or even something much larger, you know, looking at, I mean, my own example was we were on a walk trying to get to Greg's hut at the top of Crossfell, and I suddenly noticed on the far hill what looked like a man, a shape of a man on the hill, very obviously, which I thought was very strange. I kept thinking, is that the shape of the hill, or is it put there and been forgotten? Is it a hill figure we've forgotten? And I got home and looked on the map, and the actual place is called Man Edge. And I've lived here for nearly 20 years, and I've never noticed that. And I won't be the only one that's had that kind of experience during this time. So I think it was very common. And of course, when you get more involved with a place, you start noticing and learning an awful lot more about it, and it makes you look back on yourself as well. So I think it was a common thread running throughout.
Thank you. I've got another question. I think, yes, I think we've answered the ones so far that are in chat. There's a bit of chat going on, so please do dip in if you can multitask, which I'm not very good at. But Alex, you've spoken about some poems that you've written, and they will be going on the website for people's information. But also, Anne, you've used poems. You've referred to using poems, and I'm a poet, and the project was quite heavily text-based because people were asked to share their stories and their writing, which for me is an absolute joy. And it's quite interesting that poetry has emerged in these different forms. So yeah, what might that lead to? Do you think that they're done and dusted, or those poems jumping off points for something else? Maybe Anne, yeah, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so actually I can answer your question and Derek's question, because the most unexpected thing for me really was the amount that I just felt in my heart I wanted to use words and poetry in this project. And I'm not a poet. I have never written a poem before this, really, probably since primary school. And I've always just rejected poetry when I was younger as something I just couldn't get my head around and didn't enjoy that much, despite reading a lot of novels. So it just kind of sprung out at me through this project, and I'm finding it such a fantastic tool to accompany some of the visual work that I'm doing. So that was unexpected, but it's a real pleasure discovering it. So that's been absolutely fantastic, and definitely a huge takeaway for my practice from this.
Thank you. Alex?
It's been a fascinating process for me, because I started doing some very casually, because I joined a friend's workshop, which turned out to be 8 weeks course last summer, and have been writing some every week, and having joined a group. And the process of this project started through the writing of the poems, if that makes sense. The poems came first. And I realized I was waking up in the morning with ideas about a visual, not representation of the poem, but a visual part to the poem. And then realized that this was all connecting in with the project, and with the idea of creativity, and the idea of connection, and the idea of place, and the idea of environment, which is how when I was looking at the first 2 or 3 poems, they were all part of this creative, literally the creative process, and it was them that informed the visual pieces. And there are just a few lines from the poems in the piece, but an awful lot of the other words are from people's submissions. But it's very all woven in together, and that was a fascinating discipline or the opportunity rather than discipline to let that process happen. It's something I've never done before, and it was really exciting, and I can't wait to do more.
Thank you. It's just exciting to hear what's emerged. Some of those emergences have been unexpected, not just what you've encountered along the way, and it seems like something new has come up for all of you. Have we got any more questions from the audience? Burning questions. I need to have a look over here. Yeah, Jill Goodfellow saying that nature and time as well as place is something you pay more attention to. Sorry, that's my clock singing in the background. It always comes at a bad time. And yeah, it seems like things have really raced past, and yet these individual commissions on their own have kind of expanded this time. It's been really nice to have 5 different commissions on the same project, exploring things in a really different ways. So, you know, they're all available to view at Tully House as part of the larger commission, as part of the larger exhibition. So please do go along and take a look. There's a lot of pieces there that think about place and our passing through place, or how we relate to one another in place in very different ways. There's poetry, there's film, there's sculpture, there's painting, there are audio pieces, 3D pieces. Please do go and have a look. You know, thank you all 5 of you for taking on the challenge and rising to it and doing so brilliantly, and for coming along tonight as well to share about it.